Welcome to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report. Today we are talking about the things Amanda Knox does not want you to know about with the great Tuesday, who I talked last couple weeks ago about Michael Jackson with. She has her own channel here on YouTube. I will link it in the description. So, welcome Tuesday.
Hello.
So, how did you get interested in this case?
I was not interested in this case at all. I had a couple people ask me my opinion of the case, and of course I went ahead and decided to look a little bit more into it. And it just so happened that same week, Raffaele and Amanda were convicted yet again, and that, of course, got me motivated to learn about the case a little bit more. And here we are years later, so.
Right, and Amanda Knox seems to be getting a lot of press lately. She's gone back to Italy. She seems to be getting a lot of interviews, a lot of internet time. It's really incredible, and I got interested in this case when, I'm not sure if it was a relative or a friend. I was working at the Oprah magazine. She had just gotten arrested, and they wrote a letter to Oprah that I read. It was all about the case, how the prosecutor was being investigated and being accused for doing bad things, to put it simply, and that Amanda Knox had, of course, the thing I always remember, which is that her roommate had been murdered, and Amanda Knox could not get in to her house and get her belongings, so that she had gone and bought white underwear from like a 99-cent bin, and that the press had made a lot to do about this underwear and then vilified her for buying underwear. And I started looking into the case, and it took me a long time, not till way later did I find that this was not the case about the white underwear, that she had bought lingerie after the murder with her boyfriend, and the shop owner had overheard her saying, we're going to have great sex tonight. So it started me thinking about, even though for years I didn't know whether she was guilty or innocent. I was really slow to make an opinion on this case, probably slower than I needed to be, but I just didn't know. And the information that we have gotten about this case in the U.S. is way different than Europe, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The information is night and day. When you compare what went on in Italy, or even just reading the trial that's thankfully been transcribed, or translated, I should say, and then you compare it with the stuff that's here in our news media, in our talk shows especially, oh boy, totally different.
Right, and even now she's being referred to as the exonerated Amanda Knox, the innocent Amanda Knox, but she was convicted twice, and the opinion that ultimately vacated her conviction stated that she was there the night of the murder, at the murder scene, and that she washed the victim, meredithkercher's, blood off her hands.
Right.
So
that's right in there.
So I always joke and say, oh, that's her, great exoneration. That's some exoneration, that you washed the victim's blood off your hands and you were at the murder scene. And I think I often get accused, or I don't know, people say that I can't believe that people would be wrongly convicted of murder. But these same people, I believe, can't believe that people who are guilty can sometimes get off on a technicality. So I retort with that. We do have people who are out on technicalities, who are out on Alford pleas, who, in my opinion, are guilty and most likely are guilty. Sometimes they even pled guilty, which Alford plea is legally a guilty plea.
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. It's nothing new. Guilty people get away with their crimes, and sometimes innocent people get locked up. It does happen. I mean, it can happen either way. Most of the time, though, however, especially now in modern times and what we know and all the information that we have. Usually if something is false or wrong, it really falls apart, and it falls apart in an incredible way. Amanda's never had that moment. There's never been a moment where, oh my God, everything just makes sense now, and, everything we see now, the error of our ways. It's never been like that for Amanda. Her supporters would like us to believe that that's the case, but there's never been that moment where the state's case just completely crumbled apart. Right. Didn't happen.
Right. And so let's go through some of these. Let's talk about one of the first things Amanda Knox supporters will say, well, she had a terrible interrogation. Is that true?
Okay, there was no real interrogation. Actually, Amanda and Sollecito were called to the police station. It was actually Sollecito. The police wanted to talk to him about his phone call to the police, because no matter how you slice it, they could not figure out how he had called the police before the postal police arrived, which was what his story was to the police. That didn't make sense to them. They called him to the station, and he told them he was at a friend's house having dinner. He'll be there later. I mean, imagine the audacity of just telling the police, I'm busy right now. I'll be there when I can.
Wow.
So he goes to the police station, and Amanda comes along. And the police tell her, look, we don't need you. She's been complaining about being tired and being hungry and this and that. They told her flat out, go home, go get some rest. She insisted, didn't want to be alone. So that's when they asked her to maybe make a list of the people who visited the apartment and try and tell us who was there around that time or who had ever even been to the apartment, so they could kind of keep her busy, essentially. Uh-huh. And then the interpreter, the interpreter came, and I believe that was around 11 or so, 11:30. She came, and then they started, they were able to communicate with her, obviously, a little bit better, and it would be about 11:45 that she had completed this list.
Okay.
So after that, it'd be about 1:30, I want to say, is when they said, 1:45 is when she makes her first official statement. And in this statement, she finally says, look, I told Patrick I would meet him. I met him at the basketball court. We went back to my place. I remember being there. I remember him and Meredith having sex. I remember he killed Meredith. And this is my statement, essentially.
Okay, well...
Later on, at 5:45 a.m., she would make a similar statement.
Wow. And who was Patrick Lumumba?
So Lumumba owned the club La Chic, which is a bar and dance, but I think there was like a dance floor there. This is where Amanda had taken up a part-time job, sort of to cover essentially her student expenses and things like that. So she was working for him. He had texted her the night of the murder. He had texted her around 8. I wrote the time here. I never can read my own handwriting. Isn't that beautiful? So it was around 8:10 or something p.m. and he told her, look, we don't need you to come in tonight. It's not that busy. You can go ahead and take the night off. She replied to him, okay, I'll see you later. Or that's how it was translated into Italian, right? Okay. She said, okay, I'll see you later. And I think that's something this was the contention point where in America, when we say, okay, we'll see you later, it doesn't necessarily mean we're literally going to see you later.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the Italian police assumed it was, no, you're really going to see him later. At least that's what we're told from Amanda's perspective.
Right.
And then,
mm-hmm.
According to Amanda, during her interrogation, she was questioned about this. And I was trying to remember, because I was going through some, information. So I apologize, I have to go by memory here. But I think what happened was she had erased the message Patrick sent her on her phone. Like, it didn't save that message, or she had erased it. But they had the message, okay, see you later. And that's why the police were asking her, who did you send this message to?
Right. That's how I understand it too. Right. That's how I understand it too. And Patrick Lumumba had been very kind to give her a job, and she was not a great worker from what I understand. And
no.
And so it just for her to accuse him of murder is quite unusual for anyone to accuse an innocent person of murder when they're just a witness, right? At that point she was just a witness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's very odd. And like I said, it's not an interrogation. They keep trying to say it's a 30-hour interrogation. It wasn't interrogation. She essentially volunteered these statements. She never confessed. It's not a false confession. That's one of the things that irritates me, because they try to, Amanda Knox supporters, that is, they try to use statistics about false confessions.
Right.
And that can't apply in this case, because she didn't confess shit. She didn't confess anything. She blamed somebody else is what she did, and she lied about everything up until then. And how do you explain her statements to the police prior when they were just statements? There was no coercion. I mean, nothing happened.
And she let him sit in prison. They found him, right? Patrick Lumumba, her boss. It's not like she accused someone she didn't know or hadn't been kind to her. Someone she knew, someone who had been kind to her. And she let him sit in prison for 2 weeks without saying anything. So when she talks about how horrible it is to be accused of a crime, when they talk about, being falsely convicted or falsely accused of a crime, I always say, oh, is Amanda Knox going to talk about falsely accusing Patrick Lumumba and how terrible that was?
I mean, she was just young, she didn't know.
She was just young. How young was she at this time? This was, we're talking November 1st, 2007.
She keeps getting younger. My last count was 7. She was 7 years.
She was 7 years old?
No, I think she was she was 19, right?
19 or 20, I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, I mean, talk about the follies of youth. Falsely accusing someone of murder is not among the regular follies of youth, would you say?
Well, I think what's even worse here that we didn't even mention is that she was told to pay Patrick Lumumba by the courts. She was ordered to pay money to him because they found her guilty of, this false accusation. Slander. And putting him and his family through all this. And she has received millions of dollars for her book. She has not paid him.
It's $40,000, I think, American. Is that correct?
Something I think, 30 or 40, somewhere around there.
And so if she really is such an advocate for the falsely accused, and you would think she would pay up, or at least as a way to show that she's sorry, or at least for her public image,
Well, exactly. I mean, she could have very easily said, I'll make payments, or I'll do anything to get this cleared up, or anything, really. She could have reached out or did anything, and she has done absolutely nothing to show any remorse for what she did. It's always somebody else's fault.
That will be a theme. So, and I also find it really interesting that the tactics of the police, everyone, her roommates were brought in. She wasn't the only one brought in for questioning, yet she was the only one who falsely accused someone of murder. So you think that they all got relatively the same treatment? If you want to say that she was an American and she was treated more harshly, I don't know. I don't know about that claim. That doesn't really wash with me, but okay. Still.
Well, she makes the claim that she was hit in the head, okay?
Right.
During this questioning, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the officers that were there were Farika, I think is one, and let's see. There was another woman, Monica Napoleoni, and then there was a man, there was a gentleman officer there as well initially. And then later the Anna Domino, she would come in as an interpreter.
Okay.
None of them said anything about her being hit. They all said she was treated nicely. She was given her chamomile tea, her water, and
snacks.
Little snack cakes from the vending machines. The other problem, and this is kind of where I began to believe that Amanda Knox was a liar, is because she makes different claims about being hit. On one hand, she told people that she was hit in the front of the head, in the back of the head. I think at trial, she said she was hit in the back of the head twice. Mm-hmm. And then another time, she told someone she was hit in the front of the head. So she kind of has these different stories about how she was hit and where she was hit. And even later on, her own lawyer, Luciano Garga, I'm sorry about the pronunciation, I apologize. Her own lawyer came out and said, "Oh no, we never said they hit her."
Mm.
So, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make any sense that Italy, I mean, they're sophisticated. This is a Western country. It's not, she didn't go to Iran for the summer or somewhere like Russia or, she didn't go somewhere horrible. She went to a nice European nation. It does not make any sense to me that an American citizen, the authorities know she's going to have contact with a U.S. embassy. Mm-hmm. They're going to know that this case is going to be looked at and scrutinized by people around the world. Mm-hmm. And they're going to hit her?
Right. Okay, so even if that's possible, you look at the mood of what they're setting up. They're asking her if she's hungry. They're telling her to go home. You're too tired. These are not, it's not the behavior of someone who's going to start hitting you, no? Get some snack cakes, get some chamomile tea, go home, we'll interview you later. Oh, well, you're here. Well, maybe you could write down some, people that have been by your place, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm going, trying to stretch, say maybe even if these were the kind of people, it doesn't seem like they've, any of their other behavior is evidence that they're going to start hitting her and doing such a long interrogation. But what happened with, how did Raffaele Sollecito's questioning, how did that go down with what happened when he? Yeah, go ahead.
Raffaele did not testify, so we don't have his version of events, but we do have what the police say. And as I said, they wanted him to come in to clear up some discrepancies. We know that he initially told police that the night in question, he was with Amanda till about 9 o'clock, or she had left to go to Lachute to meet up with her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had rolled a joint, and he went on his computer, and then it would be about 1 a.m. when Amanda came home.
Okay.
At some point during his questioning, he admits, I've told you a lot of rubbish, and I believed Amanda, and I went ahead and I was trying to cover for her. And so then he stops being her alibi, and he basically says that she wasn't with him that night.
Right. So she went out, I think, for some period he wasn't with her, right? For some window where just happens to be the window right around the murder, right?
Exactly. And the other problem that Amanda had was this text message that she received. She kept saying she was at Raffaele Sollecito's home when she received the message. But according to the cell phone reports, that handset connected in a Sector 3,
mm-hmm.
which is, it's a 3-mast, and I do not know these names at all. But essentially, it boils down to, if she were at Raffaele's home the way she claimed,
mm-hmm.
it would not have connected there. Like, it wouldn't have connected to that mast. It would have connected somewhere else. So based on, where these signals tag through, they can tell you kind of what area you're at.
Mm-hmm.
If she would have been at Raffaele's house, it would have connected somewhere else.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they knew she wasn't there. They do believe she at least had to have left Raffaele's place before she received that text message.
And their phones were magically turned off at the same time.
Right. I believe it was around 8:30 or so. Their phones shut off, and they didn't come back on until, 6 a.m. or something like that?
The next morning,
it was
right.
Pretty early. But what was weird about this was that they're not known for having their phone shut off, either of them. It's not common behavior. Now, if you have somebody that does that daily or not, then probably wouldn't be such a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these two never did that, and they just so happened to do that around the same time.
Very interesting. And also, their computers also did not support the fact that they were asleep all morning. So that they were playing music, in the wee small hours, like at 4 or 5 a.m. Is that right?
Yeah, it was something along those lines. I remember the computer came on at a certain time.
And the music that they were playing was like super, it wasn't like cool jazz. It was super aggro, energetic music playlist.
Yeah.
So, not like your wonderful intro music, Tuesday.
Yes, thank you.
It was like music that you might say, clean up a crime scene to, perhaps, maybe. I don't know. Do something, like energetic to. I always find it interesting when you look at the playlist of songs. And so this was unusual when they said, we slept in for a long time, so.
Right, and they're not known to sleep in. They're both of them are considered morning people as well.
So, now we get into the issue of the knife.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the murder weapon. And it had some interesting DNA. And now you as a scientist maybe can explain this to me a little bit more, like what low copy DNA is. But it had Meredithkercher's DNA on the blade and Amanda Knox's DNA on the handle. Is that correct? This knife from Raffaele's place, it was like a big kitchen knife, cooking, butcher, chopping knife. right?
Yeah. Yeah, they had found two knives. I don't remember them finding DNA on the one knife. It was just a knife that was similar,
Mm-hmm.
that could have been part of the murder scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then the larger knife, the one that they believe inflicted the final blow, had DNA of meredithkercher on the blade. And then there was DNA of Amanda Knox on the knife handle. Now, the reason why, the low copy or what, all this sort of back and forth with the DNA, I understand the argument, and that's nice and wonderful, but the alleles that are found, there's a certain number of them that can be found in order to be considered a match. And if I remember correctly, it's 16 throughout most of it. They found 16 or whatever, but I apologize. I'm going off of memory here with some of this because I didn't get to review some of this part because it is complicated. You guys, it's very complicated. There's a lot of information in this case. But ultimately, they had enough to make a positive match.
Right.
Of course, you're going to get the defense to say, oh, this isn't good enough or whatever. I understand that. But ultimately, there's a match there. There's no reason for her DNA to be on that blade unless she came in contact with that blade. And what makes it even more solidified in my mind was the fact that while Sollecito was in prison, he made up this story about cooking for Meredith at his place and pricking her finger, and this is why her DNA is on that knife. Now, why on God's green earth would you try to compensate for the DNA on the blade if your argument is that it never happened? Come to find out, Meredith never went to Raffaele Sollecito's place, let alone have him cook dinner for her.
Right. So this is a classic example of what's called tailoring the evidence. So he knows that this knife exists with Meredith's DNA on the blade, and Amanda's, I don't know, maybe Amanda's on the handle, right? But
yeah, Amanda's DNA is on the handle, and it's probably skin, it's probably skin cells, or it could be her blood. We're not totally sure. That's where the low copy stuff comes in or whatever, but you could argue that her DNA would be on there because she was there and cooked. I mean, that wouldn't be too big of a deal. But why is Meredith's DNA on that blade?
Right, and so he claims that he was hallucinating because he was kept in solitary confinement for so long, and all he had was he wrote it in his diary or a letter. Do you remember which? I don't remember.
Yeah,
which.
I think it was his diary
That this had gone on, and it's very damning that he's trying to tailor the evidence, make up a fake story to tailor the evidence.
Right.
As a guilty person would, right? You have to think of reasons why the evidence is there, right? And that
right, you want to have an answer for everything. That's how guilty people think. If you're innocent, you probably don't have an answer for everything.
Right. But the knife is often too. Can we talk about some of the other DNA that was found? Because the knife is often really focused on, because there was such little, they couldn't test it so many times because there was such little material, and it was low copy. So let's talk about the mixed DNA, that's what supporters like to call it, that lights up under luminol, in Philomena's room, which was the room of the staged break-in. So Amanda Knox loves to say there was no DNA of me in the murder room, right? I'm sorry to call it the murder room. I don't mean to be disrespectful to the memory of Meredithkercher, but it was Meredithkercher's room, and let's talk about what was found there. Namely, Amanda Knox's only light source, her lamp, was
Right.
found under the bed as if someone had been cleaning, right?
Someone was looking for something and needed a lamp.
Right. Good point. Good point.
They needed a lamp. It only makes sense because there's no. I mean, you have to consider Rudy. His handprints are on the wall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In Meredith's blood. He's got blood on him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If he went into Amanda's room to grab a lamp, his DNA would be on that lamp, whether it was before or after, that lamp was wiped off. That's what I thought was like, well,
Yes.
Why is this lamp wiped off? There's no fingerprints on it. There's no nothing.
That's a very good point. And there was also mixed DNA of Meredith and Amanda in Philomena's room.
In Philomena's room, yep.
And they never like to talk about that. They always like to talk about the DNA in the bathroom, but not in Philomena's room. And if this were just what they always say, supporters always say, is this is just basic contamination. They lived in the same room. It's not really DNA. I've even had them say that this was just DNA lying around. And the reason that it lights up under luminol was that Amanda Knox had some kind of root vegetable on her feet. And that's why it lit up under luminol. Seriously. So it's absurd.
I know.
They do not want you to say blood. Well, you say, well, then what is it that made this light up under luminol? Oh, root vegetables, or I don't know. It could be anything. Many things light up under luminol.
They've said bleach, but bleach doesn't have people's DNA.
Right. Good point.
So it's like, well, bleach would destroy DNA. It wouldn't have their DNA. So that doesn't make any sense either. And DNA is not, I mean, this is the thing I don't know. I feel like too many people watch too much television, or they're watching too many CSI movies, and they've actually talked about this. Like there's been research done on what they call the CSI effect, which is that juries and people who are following cases and stuff, they always expect that there's going to be DNA, there's going to be some big crack the case type thing. DNA it's hard to get. It doesn't just land anywhere and everywhere. It's not just flying out of us all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's hard to even locate. So when they found this with the luminol, that's where they tested. That's how they were able to find this DNA. It's not a coincidence, right? It's her blood and Amanda's DNA. It just so happens to be in these places. So that's what's damning about it. And Meredith just so happened to be dead, okay? And Amanda just so happens to be a liar.
True, and if you would think that this is all contamination, then why isn't it I'm sorry, maybe I made this point before, but why isn't it Philomena or I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name. Laura, the other roommate's DNA. It's never meredithkercher's DNA and one of the other roommates. It's always either Rudy or it's always Amanda Knox's and meredithkercher's mixed together. Right?
Right, and that's an excellent point. Like, why don't we find these DNA samples of Laura or Philomena in her own room mixed with Meredith? Why is that?
Right, and a very interesting thing also is that Raffaele's footprint was found on the bath mat in blood, and where do Rudy Guede's footprints go?
His go right out the door.
Right, and
his go right out the door.
Are they bare?
Are they in blood?
Are they barefoot?
No.
So if this were just a burglar, right, or someone unrelated, then what are they doing walking around the apartment with their shoes off?
I don't understand, but here's the other real big kicker. Meredith's room was locked.
Good point.
And you need a key to lock that door. You
Mm-hmm.
literally need a key to, if you want to lock it from the outside,
Mm-hmm.
you have to lock it with a key. And if it was just Rudy running out of there, he would have to have that key, but his footprints would stop. You know, you would
And face
see
the door to
them
lock
hesitate
Right.
at that door, and then you would see, you know, and then you would see the footprints pick up again, obviously.
Great point.
That would leave a distinctive pattern on that floor. Unless you're trying to claim that somehow, I don't know, that it skipped or something.
Right.
Those footprints go right out the door, and they are wide spread, you know. So he's running out that door. He's getting the hell out of there. And the door was open. He didn't stop and leave the outdoor open, so why would he stop and lock Meredith's room?
Good point.
How would he know where the key was? How would he know to do that?
And roommate Philomena and Amanda Knox had two different statements about how Meredith's habits on having her door locked. What were they?
Right. Amanda said that Meredith locked her room all the time. Mm-hmm. And Philomena said, absolutely not. Open that door. She does not leave her door locked.
Right. She was so panicked by this thought. So this is very different. I know we're going backwards a little bit, but Amanda Knox said she came home. She saw blood in the bathroom. Is that correct? Or
right. I actually made a little flow chart for Amanda in our blood. Because we've got two distinct stories, okay, coming from Amanda.
And I'm going to put that flow chart, I'm going to put that flow chart up in my Roberta Glass True Crime Report Facebook group. If that's okay with you. Okay.
Cool. So when Amanda comes home, she had actually wrote an email to her family and friends back at home after everything happened, and she made a statement to her family and friends. And she said that when she came home, she saw blood. She took a shower first, is what she did. She took a shower. And then when she came out of the shower, she saw blood on the bath mat. And then she noticed some blood in the sink. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then she carries on with the rest of her story. Now, at her trial, she testifies that when she came home, she found blood in the sink, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the shower, then she took her shower, and then she came out and noticed the blood in the bath mat. But when we look at the video that the police took of the scene, okay,
mm-hmm.
that blood on the bath mat is the very first thing anyone will notice. I mean, even the camera person's like, boom, right on that blood, the bath mat. So it just seems very odd that she has this different order of knowing where the blood was, but somehow she didn't notice bloody footprints in the hallway.
And what always strikes me is that she would get naked and be vulnerable after seeing unknown blood, be so not curious about it, and so relaxed to get naked and get in the shower. I mean, we've all seen Psycho, right?
Right. Well, wait a minute. No, let's ask the other obvious question here. You come home, your door is open.
Right.
Your freaking door is open.
Mm-hmm.
Do you not immediately go through every room in your house?
Yes.
Like, grab a bat or something? I mean, maybe, like, let's just give her the benefit of the doubt, and,
mm-hmm.
you know, she's saying that this door has always had problems. Okay, fine. Maybe it's something that it's not so shocking to you. But don't you immediately search every room to make sure who's home or who's not here or what's going on? Amanda doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
She just goes into the bathroom, disrobes, okay, does her thing, and then realizes she doesn't have a towel. This is her story later on, by the way, when she finds out that there's
I'm really glad you brought up the
DNA
towel.
prints in the hallway. She says she does a shuffle.
Yep.
With the bath mat to her room, naked.
She's so comfortable. Huh? Who does that? She didn't want to get the floor wet. And let's just talk about Amanda.
Well, who cares if you get the floor wet? There's blood in your bathroom.
Good point. Good point. But let's also talk about her problems with Meredith. She had problems with Meredith because Amanda Knox didn't like to flush the toilet. She didn't like to clean up. Meredith was very tidy. She shared this bathroom with Meredith. She sees the blood, even if you're, say, more relaxed around blood. And she claimed that she thought, well, maybe someone had some issues with their period or something, right?
Right. Ew.
Okay. But it is not in... Who does she think that person is? Not Meredith, the neat freak, who's always getting on her for not cleaning the apartment and not flushing the toilet, right?
Right.
Who is this phantom woman, menstruating woman? You know what I mean?
I don't
just
know.
A little just odd logic, you know? It doesn't...
Yeah.
There's just another one of those disjointed things. Okay, if Meredith were the one who were so relaxed about cleanliness, maybe that would be more understandable, but not so here, right?
Yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense at all. And the thing is like I said, the first thing you're gonna notice when you walk into that bathroom, just like the cameraman that, took the visual of that bathroom when the police went through, that bath mat stands out like a sore thumb.
Right.
You cannot miss it.
It does look like a man's footprint. It's a big, fairly big footprint there in blood.
Oh yeah. It's so obvious, and it's right there. How did she somehow not miss that? And like I said, her email home says, "Oh, I took a shower and then I noticed these things."
Right.
No, that doesn't make any... That's another part. And then when the police finally do arrive, what do they say? They say she stinks. She doesn't look like she took a shower at all.
And you know what you can see in any documentary, they love to talk about the kiss, which I care so little about, between her and Raffi, where he's petting her arm and they're hugging outside the cottage where Meredith's body has just been found. And supporters say, oh, he was comforting her. She looks upset. But they're continuously kissing. Fine. I'm not making a judgment on that. But you can look at her hair there. Does that look like newly washed, blow-dried hair to you? That's all. Take a look at it.
No.
Just for that alone.
If we listen to her own story, she wouldn't have been able to finish all the blow drying because she found the feces in the toilet. Okay,
so who did the feces belong to?
That definitely belonged to Rudy Guede.
Right.
And I believe that was even tested and confirmed.
Okay, and his story was that he was in the bathroom the whole scene of the murder, which could not have been true.
Yeah, he's came up with a couple different versions, but ultimately he said he had a bad kebab earlier that night, and he all of a sudden had to go to the bathroom, and he put some headphones on while he was relieving himself, and then he heard some noise, and that's why he promptly got up out of there.
Very interesting. And that was not flushed, and Amanda Knox brought this feces to the attention of the police.
Right. She was very concerned about preserving the feces.
Interesting. And can we talk about what Amanda Knox had previously staged a break-in as a prank, we know, in Seattle.
Right.
And it has been determined by the courts that this was a staged break-in. I don't think
Yes.
anyone's arguing with that.
Well, the supporters definitely
The
do.
supporters do, but even the most supportive court of Amanda, that Amanda Knox faced did not, said that, and we were talking about it before we started recording, and you were explaining to me, because one of the issues that I was saying was that it would have been impossible for Rudy Guede, supporters say Rudy Guede did this alone. Amanda Knox was brought in because of anti-Americanism, because she didn't speak the language, because she handled the situation poorly. And Rudy Guede could not have scaled this wall without leaving marks. It had been rainy before. It's very straight up and down, and there were no bars on the window. So the demonstration that's been done about how easy to scale that wall of the building that Amanda Knox lived in is really null and void, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit different thing going on there, because if you look at the demonstration, the guy that climbs up that wall there or whatever, he really does rely on the bars that are now installed on the windows to climb. I suppose, technically, you could have somebody climb up there. I don't have a problem with somebody saying that. But the problem that I'm having is you have somebody going up and down, scaling the wall. Well, I mean, why didn't he just break in through the front door?
Good
if
point.
The door's kind of screwed up and old anyway. I mean, if you look at the place, it looks like it's an older
villa
type of area,
Mm-hmm. Good
Looks
point.
like he'd have a lot more success just breaking in during, in the front door. But let's say he did scale up this place, and then he found a rock and he threw it. They're saying he threw it from the parking lot or whatever, because it overlooks that window.
Right.
Did all that, came back down, scaled up again, went through. I'm having a hard time seeing how somebody gets through that glass there in a way that is not going to cut him, where his DNA was not found at all in that room or around. They didn't find his DNA anywhere near there. The other problem is, and it's difficult to talk about, but there's photos of the glass, and you can clearly see that the glass does not go past where the shutters would be if they were closed. Meaning, it seems to be more consistent with somebody having the shutters closed on the outside and somebody breaking that rock or breaking the glass from the inside. When you throw a rock at a window, that glass, it sprays toward the velocity of the rock. It's going to spray in both ways. You're going to have a ledge just completely covered with glass, not just covered with glass up to a certain point.
Right, and also the glass was on top of everything, too.
Right. Like the room had been ransacked prior, and then glass gets thrown on top of everything later on. Well, that doesn't make much sense.
And I love in Raffaele Sollecito's phone call to the police, he lets them know that there's been a burglary, but nothing's missing.
Right.
Somehow he knows that. He knows what everyone, Laura owns, Philomena owns, He
was so cordial in his phone call, wasn't he? Hello, I am...
It starts out, there's a great documentary, I'll try to link it in the description of this video, about the murder of Meredithkercher and Amanda Knox and the people who I believe murdered her. And it starts off with that phone call. It's great.
Right.
You can see how, if it weren't so tragic, how absurd it is, really.
Right. It is very hilarious how they behave and the things that they say and what they're trying to get away with. But how does he know nothing was taken? They haven't even gotten into Meredith's room. He doesn't live there. He doesn't know, what the other roommates own or what they don't own. He has no way of knowing any of that. The only thing he knows at that point is that there's a broken window.
Absolutely. And can I just say something about the DNA? So I think what's very convincing is when Amanda Knox comes on, American TV or wherever she's being interviewed, and she said, there was no traces of me in that room.
Right.
How did she do that? How were there no traces of her in that room? And very interesting part of that is that meredithkercher's body was covered, and commonly victims who know their perpetrators often cover them, especially if they're a woman.
Right.
So how do you
that
think,
seems to be an agreement.
I mean, I know it's a tough question, but I mean, just speculating, how do you think it's possible that, there was no traces of Amanda? There was, if you consider that the crime scene, right? Just the room.
Well, they did
which is not
find
true.
They did find a footprint that was a match to hers.
Right.
And there were some hairs that were lost, that were found in Meredith's hand, and they were of Amanda's color. So, unfortunately, that material was lost.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, fortunately for Amanda, it was lost.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it. When she says no traces of her, I mean, yes and no. But that crime scene was without a doubt altered in some way.
Right, because Rudy Guede said, how did they clean up so much blood? That there was so much blood in the hallway and the room.
And as I explained, when we were talking before,
mm-hmm.
I've long believed this was a thrill kill,
mm-hmm.
and I believe it was planned. And I believe Amanda and Raffaele possibly wore gloves of some sort, and they were disposed of somehow. That's my theory. I think they got caught, obviously, when the postal police arrived, and she's got a mop in her hand.
Right. But I think the most, let's talk about sort of like the mind of Amanda Knox in another episode.
Okay, yeah.
But to finish up here, just with the DNA, to believe Amanda Knox is innocent, you have to believe that all the DNA that implicates Rudy, it was perfectly collected, is right on target, and correct. But any of the DNA that implicates Amanda Knox or Raffaele Sollecito is contaminated or wrong or an error. Now, what are the chances? How does life work that way? I mean,
if you are arguing that the DNA is wrong for these two, then you have to argue that the DNA is wrong as well for Rudy Guede. You just have to.
But
you'd have to throw it all out if that's what you want to try and argue. But to say that this was selectively planned or that they somehow knew, it's illogical. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting, and you never hear about the blood in Filomena's room, and you never hear about the opinion by the court that Amanda Knox was bleeding at the same time as Meredithkercher. So why were they bleeding at the same time? Right,
and she does have some sort of an abrasion or cut that appears to be on her neck. Now, she tried saying that this was a hickey.
Mm-hmm.
There's a low quality picture available online, but then someone else found a picture of her, and I don't know how legit it is, but if you look at her ear,
mm-hmm.
it looks like someone ripped out an earring, like the whole bottom portion of the ear is cut.
Hmm.
And that would explain why, like, there's a theory out there about the lamp,
mm-hmm.
that maybe she lost her earring.
Oh, good point. Mm-hmm.
And she had to go and get this lamp to see if because they were doing this in the dark, obviously, cleaning up. And so she went and got her lamp to see if she could find her earring. And that ties into the other thing of why she was talking about blood in the sink. Oh, I thought maybe it was from my ear because I pierced my ear.
Right. She told everyone she had just pierced her ear. And
Yeah.
that was bleeding,
And
and that's why suddenly Meredith had lost blood at the same time. And,
right.
and it went somehow in Philomena's room too,
Mhm.
at the same time, Meredith's blood and Amanda Knox's blood. It's just the problem with this case is that it only works if you understand it at sort of it only works for Amanda Knox's defense. I mean, if you accept it, everything on the surface level, right? And you don't really put
Right.
together the big picture or put in all the evidence. Maybe
Well,
she
like,
could have gotten
yeah,
hit,
like,
okay. But how many people really falsely accuse a person of murder and then let him sit in prison for 2 weeks? Someone you know. And she ruined his life, by the way, Patrick Lumumba. I mean,
oh
he
yeah.
lost his business. I mean, it really was devastating to his life. For what reason? To try to save herself?
And that's just it. She's never really provided a good reason. But this case, like everything else, I mean, it begins to make sense when you take everything into consideration. What the defense likes to do, which is what every defense does, is they like to isolate different things and act as though they occurred in a vacuum. And anyone can look at different little pieces and say, well, that's, to be expected, or, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. But when you combine everything and you put everything together and you take account the person that saw her the next morning going into the aisle of the cleaning supplies, and you take all of this stuff into consideration, you put it all together, it points to a logical conclusion that they were definitely involved, and that's exactly what the police believed. But if you try and isolate everything and you try to poke holes and stuff, then it becomes easier to say, well, make excuses and blame everybody. But like you pointed out with the DNA, it's just, you can't say one set of DNA is valid and then magically say that the other two involved, well, that's just contaminated. The police don't know Amanda. They have no reason to frame her or pin it on her. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. We have so much more to talk about this case, but I really appreciate you talking to me about this Tuesday. You have an awesome channel where you're talking about the Michael Jackson case. And yes. I've heard facts I've never heard anywhere else. And I've been, pretty interested in that case for a while. That case, or I don't know, is it a subject matter or is it a case, or I don't know, Michael Jackson, is it a thing? Who knows?
Yeah, it covers a lot of different things. And so you've got the one case, but then you've got all the other stuff that happened prior and then after, and yeah.
I really enjoy your sense of humor, and if you're interested in someone who really digs deep into the facts of the case, reads court records, case files, and really has a no-nonsense approach, check out Tuesday's channel, and I will be sure to link it in the description of this video. Tuesday, thank you so much for talking to me about this case.
Awesome. Thank you.